Welcome. Nice full house today. I'm Brooks Rayford, president of NC Tech, and I want to welcome you all who are here in the room, as well as those who are joining us through live stream. This is our third quarterly Rufus. Didn't even see you. How are you? You're much more colorful normally. Where's your ties are always the winner of the room. It's too hot for that. Too hot. This is our third quarterly Government Vendor Network session of 2024. And a quick note that we are recording this session, so we'll send everybody who was registered an email once the video of this session is ready, and the attachments the links to the materials that you'll see today and will be shared with you today. As most of you know, we're very fortunate to have had the services and expertise of the Brooks Pierce Law Firm for many years as our legislative counsel. Ed Turlington and Drew Moretz. Where's Ed? What are you pointing? That way. Okay, I thought it was over here. Ed and Drew, who represent us on policy matters in North Carolina. They'll provide, as they normally do, a brief legislative update at the conclusion of our main program. Tony Copeland is here, longtime good friend of both mine and the association's. He was Secretary of Commerce for Governor Cooper's first term. Wow. He may have a third term of some sort. We'll see. But anyway, Tony was Secretary of Commerce in the first term and then has headed up the economic development practice here at Brooks Pierce since then. So thank you for being here. I believe we also have some summer associates maybe from the firm who are in the room. Raise your hand if so. Over here. Okay, welcome. Glad to have you. As we look ahead, I want to call your attention to several activities that I hope your companies and organizations might participate in. Every summer in August, nice cool August, we have our annual Golf Classic and Leadership Summit in Pinehurst. I'd encourage your organizations to have representation at the Leadership Summit. In particular, will be featuring among the speakers and segments will be Secretary of DIT and State CIO Jim Weaver, and also Tori Jessup, Chief Deputy. Both of those events are highlighted on our website, easy to find. Also a reminder that the annual NC Tech Awards program is kind of a two-part thing. The nomination application period is open now. It closes Friday. So you want to make sure that you peruse the categories, and if there are individuals or companies, including your own, that you feel ought to be in the mix, you can't win if you don't apply, please submit or encourage someone on your team to do that. The event where we announce the winners and celebrate all the finalists, et cetera, this year is a little bit later than normal. It's normally just before Thanksgiving, but it will be December 3rd at the Raleigh Convention Center. So put that on your radar. So there's a lot going on. I'll recap all of that in the same email that I mentioned earlier. So with today's hybrid format, when we get to Q&As at the end of our speakers' remarks, those who are watching online can submit questions using the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Please use the chat function just if you have a technical issue or whatever. We'll monitor that too. But the Q&A button is what you want to use if you have something you'd like to submit for us to raise here. Today's session is co-sponsored by Cisco and Presidio. They've done this before with us, great supporters and members. So I'd like to welcome Liz McCormick of Cisco to say a few words and introduce our featured guests. Thank you, Liz.
Hi. Oh, goodness. Okay, Brooks, I may have broken something.
You touch a button.
Maybe. Okay. Okay, well, I'm Liz McCormick. I am the regional manager for Cisco, and today with Presidio, we are pleased to sponsor the session today for the NC Tech Government Vendor Network. Thank you for fixing this. And then I get to say a little plug for Cisco and Presidio before we introduce the speakers today. Cisco is a global leader in networking and IT solutions with a strong focus on the public sector. We offer a comprehensive range of products and services designed to meet the unique needs of government agencies and public institutions. From secure networking and cloud solutions to advanced cybersecurity measures, we help enhance operational efficiency, improve public safety, and foster greater citizen engagement. At Cisco, and with the partnership of Presidio, Oh, goodness. We are committed to providing the tools and expertise to our customers to deliver services, improve citizen and student experiences, and embrace the digital era. So today we have the pleasure of hosting Tracy Dokes and Chris Beal. So Tracy Dokes is the president and CEO of MCNC, and Chris Beal is the VP of Security Services and CISO of MCNC. Tracy has held, as we talked about earlier, has held many leadership positions in a mix of public and private sector organizations, including a stint as Chief Deputy CIO as well as CIO for the state of North Carolina. She has been with MCNC since 2020. Chris has also held a mix of public and private sector roles and has been with MCNC for 11 years. So MCNC is a longtime member of NC Tech. So please join me in welcoming them to the stage. So thank you so much.
It feels like coming back home every time I'm around all of these folks who've always been so supportive of MCNC and me personally. I think Mary mentioned that she's followed me for 3 jobs now. So I don't know what that says, but that's just been the nature of my work over the last 30 years. Which is hard to believe. I will say, you mentioned a brief stint as chief deputy. Tony and I both know 4 years is not brief.
It's like 12 years.
It felt like a lot longer. There's a lot going on. Tony and I worked together, particularly during COVID. And that was just a really difficult time for all of us. Mr. Minshew and I have worked very, very closely together. Jonathan Shaw, there's just so many.
I want to say a lot of people were doing what you were doing. All the networks shut down. Nobody could get through COVID things, and you were the one helping us out.
I appreciate that. It was not just me, but I appreciate it. Yes.
The person I called.
Well, yes, you did. Yes, you did. Yeah, those calls were all day long, right? Where we were all dealing with that. If you ever hear Trey Rabin talk, he'll tell you that one of the first calls he got at the beginning of COVID was me saying, "Hey, how are we getting these kids back to school?" And he's like, "I haven't even decided what I'm doing with my own staff yet." So, but that was my number one priority, and it remains that, right? And as a forever public servant of North Carolina. So I'm glad to be here today. Thank you for inviting Chris and I to come. And what Brooks mentioned to me is that this was the first time that MCNC has been spotlighted here. So hopefully it won't be the last time. Is there a clicker somewhere? Oh, very good. Thank you. So we were talking in the room a little bit ago about the history of MCNC. We have been around for 40 plus years, and we were started with Governor Jim Hunt, who was really looking to attract more businesses into RTP. We initially received funding from the legislature to support ourselves. Over time, we were able to support ourselves through our services, and we continue to do that today. We started with higher education. That's who we provided connectivity for when we first started. And now you'll see, next slide, one more, and then we'll go back. Now we are providing support for 100% of higher ed, 69% of the independent colleges and universities, 82% of charter schools. And then you can see all of these other named entities there. What I will mention is we don't just do education, we also run the telehealth network for the state of North Carolina as well, which is obviously very, very important, particularly when you start to talk about rural communities and these smaller healthcare organizations that need access to that in order to support their patients. Can you go back 2 more? There we go. Thank you. And so this is our map that is already outdated. We have 5,000 plus miles of fiber infrastructure across North Carolina. Recently, we were awarded 12 million from NTIA, which is the Department of Commerce, in order to expand our fiber network, not just for our community anchor institutions, but also so last mile providers can build off of that to help our rural citizens across the state get connectivity, and not just baseline connectivity, but the connectivity that they need to get healthcare, to get education, to get jobs within their communities. Because it's very, very difficult to understand, and we were talking about this a little while ago, is that the desert for connectivity really exists in our rural communities in a way that I could never have imagined before I started this job. I knew of it some when I was the state CIO, but being in this role really helped me get an appreciation of so many people in North Carolina that don't have connectivity, which means they also don't have the same opportunities as everybody else. And so we're really proud of the work that we're doing in our connectivity work. In particular, we will be connecting more community anchor institutions, which, you know, some of those numbers that you saw with the community colleges, we're at 69%. We'd love to connect more of them. It's just too expensive to do that. But with the funding from the NTIA, it allows us to expand in order to connect some of those folks as well as other healthcare organizations. So what we do, I know I've talked quite a bit about connectivity, but we also provide other technology services. So Chris Beal, who's our VP for cybersecurity, is going to talk a bit about our growing cybersecurity service. It's been expanding pretty exponentially over the last few years, certainly since I started at MCNC. I do remember meeting with Chris and Jean when I was at DIT, and we talked about the services that MCNC was going to be providing to the schools, and it has come so far even since then. So Chris is going to talk quite a bit about that. Cisco knows we have our VoIP service that we use for ourselves. We're also extending it to the telehealth network as a service because some of those healthcare organizations want to be able to get all of their services in one place. So the more that we partner with folks to be able to provide that, the better off we'll be. We don't have to do everything. And as a matter of fact, we can't. And so partnering with some of you and others in the vendor community is really important for us to serve our customers. There's other collaboration work that we do, as you see here. We also provide data centers services like co-location and the managed hosting component, data backup and recovery. That has become something that our customers are asking more and more of us to do. So figuring out what's our plan? What are we going to do next as it relates to data center? Because we are all, we have their machines on the floor. We don't have a cloud service for them currently, but we could. And so as we start to build our strategy for the next 5 years, that'll be something that we contemplate. And then something that has been really important for our customers is our consulting. So we do have a group of network engineers who consult with our customers when they need help. And so the work that they've done with the schools has probably been so pivotal for all of them to be able to get connected, stay connected, and utilize our cybersecurity services. So when they need help or they need some understanding of how to use their products and services, that's who they call. And so that's a big portion of the work that we do as well. And again, we definitely will see an expansion of that going forward. Next. And what's on our radar for 2024? So lots. As I mentioned before, not only those services that you saw us talk about, but we also have some new projects and pilots that we're working on around AI, around quantum, in partnership with Duke and NC State, and other items that we will be looking at across the board. How we do data centers. So there's cloud partnerships that we are evaluating. And again, we're embarking on our 5-year strategy process. And that's where we'll start to figure out what other things we could be doing, as well as our fiber plan. So even when you look at this map, the 2 red proposed routes are from the NTIA grant that we received. But then what? That's been our main question, is then what? There's only so much fiber that you can build. There's only, once everybody's connected, then they're connected. And for MCNC, it really is about who we want to be when we grow up. And so part of my role here, if not my main role, is to work with some of you. We're going to engage thought leaders, probably some vendors are going to be engaged, legislators, to help us understand, what do you think we should be when we grow up? How do you think that we can continue to serve our customers, as well as a vendor that we are working with, which is Accenture. We are engaged with Accenture to start this process here very shortly, mid-August. And we're really excited about that. And I hope to come back and talk to you about that process and how you can be a part of that. So with that, I will hand it over to Chris.
Thanks, Tracy.
Mhm.
All right, so Tracy wants me to talk about cybersecurity things. I figured that that's probably not on anyone's mind. There's probably not any events going on in the world that have folks concerned about. I hate it. Sorry. Okay. So as Tracy said, I head up the cybersecurity team at MCNC. I will say that it has been the absolute pleasure of my professional career to work at MCNC. I've been with the organization for 11 years this year, and it's the best place I've ever worked. And that's quite frankly because of the people that work there and our focus on our mission to help the community. It's just a tremendous place, and to a person, everyone is dedicated to how do we figure out how to do what's right for the community? How do we figure out how to help the community? Now, sometimes we have disagreements about what is the right way to go about doing that. But when those things come up, it's really helpful to know that, everyone's viewpoint is coming from a place of, we really want to help the community. So, and part of that for me is not just the people that work at MCNC, but the people that we work with in the community. So again, a big thank you to the folks from Cisco and Presidio for sponsoring today. They are significant partners with us at MCNC. So thank you for that partnership. I also see Jen and Brent from Palo Alto here, big partners for us on the cybersecurity services, which we're going to talk more about in a moment. Also, John Sternstein, a big partner for us as well in the consulting space. So if there's anyone else that's here that I missed, I apologize, but I just wanted to call those folks out because it's really helpful from a partnership perspective. So we'll go to the next slide. All right, so our cybersecurity practice, our focus on providing cybersecurity capabilities to the community is called Vital Cyber. And our mission within Vital Cyber is all about making world-class cybersecurity protections affordable and accessible to the MCNC community. Many of you are involved in the cybersecurity space, either directly or tangentially. And if you are aware that the cybersecurity protections that folks need in order to protect themselves in this world that we live in, they are expensive and they're complicated. And so our driving focus with everything we're doing around cybersecurity is all about how do we make these things affordable and accessible to the folks in our community. Tracy talked about the education community a lot. If you think about K-12 schools, charter schools, community colleges, those folks are understaffed significantly. And most of the folks that are working there, they do a fantastic job, but their focus is on keeping the lights on. And so it's, finding time to peel off to go worry about cybersecurity things is often not top priority. So it's really challenging for those folks to have the resources that they need to dedicate to the full-time job of worrying about what the threat actors are bringing towards us. And then that accessibility piece, the complexity, even in many cases, if you can afford the latest and greatest technology, you don't have the resources with the training and the expertise to make that thing work and manage it continually. And oftentimes what we find in this community is that when those folks get that training and expertise, they can make a whole lot more money somewhere else. And so it's hard for these institutions to retain these folks. And so this is a challenge that we have seen over and over again in the community. And that's what has pushed us with what we're doing around cybersecurity is, okay, how can we help? What can we do to help our community address these challenges? So we'll go next here. So within Vital Cyber, we're really focused on managed services, consulting, tools and services, and advocacy. Advocacy is really all about, we have lots of connections. We're connected to lots of different places in the community. How can we bring the right folks together? Tracy mentioned earlier that we're not always the one solving the problem, but we're always looking to figure out how can problems get solved. And so the advocacy piece is really important for us. Consulting, maybe we'll go next and talk about that. Next slide. Keep going here. Sorry, too many transitions here. So within consulting, we do a couple of different things. We have staff augmentation and retainer type services where folks will generally purchase like a bucket of hours from us. And we have folks on staff to provide consulting services in lots of different areas from a security perspective. So many of these folks don't have a CISO full-time or full-time staff dedicated to security. So oftentimes they will come to us and say, hey, can you help me out with this? And so we have a wide breadth of expertise and experience. And so many times we will just, have a bucket of hours available. When you need us, call us, we'll come out and assist with whatever it is you need. So we do those kinds of things. And we also have package type engagements, our cybersecurity program review, cyber hygiene assessment, assisting with creating disaster recovery plans, business continuity plans, conducting tabletop exercises, risk assessments, all of those types of things are engagements that our consulting team does for the community. So we'll go next slide. And we'll talk about managed services now. And so our mantra within building out our managed services is no more blinking lights. We hear a lot from folks in the community that, hey, look, I don't need you to generate alerts and send me those. I already have too many of those. I can't deal with the alerts that I already have. So I need you, MCNC, to do something about the problem. Don't just tell me that the problem exists. So no more blinking lights. Everything we're doing around managed services is all about how do we take work off the plate of our community, not add more work to their plate. Let's go next. So this is the portfolio of services within our managed security services that we operate today. Managed firewall services, DDoS protection, endpoint protection, external attack surface monitoring, DNS filtering, web content security, securing application access, and network monitoring and protection. So these are things that we provide services for today. One of the questions I get a lot You can see in the middle, our security operations monitoring and response. So this is our SOC, our operations team that is powering all of these managed services. One of the questions I get a lot from folks is, oh, so you're a SOC as a service. And we have to qualify that answer. And that's because when folks say SOC as a service, most folks are thinking, oh, you're somewhere that I can just send telemetry to, send events to, and you'll monitor it for me. And we really don't do that. And the reason for that is in cybersecurity, context is everything. And we need context in order to solve problems, to not just generate alerts, not just generate work. What we don't want to do is look at your logs, not have context for what we're seeing, and contact you and say, hey, we saw this. Well, what does that mean? I don't know. Good luck. Right? A lot of SOC as a service type folks, that's the kind of thing they do. And it doesn't add value generally that's commensurate with what you're paying for that service. And so for us, again, back to how do we add value? How do we take action? We have to have context. So we are operating these services within the context of that specific service. So for our managed firewall service, we know what that firewall looks like. We know why the firewall rules that are there. We know why we have put them in place. We know everything that's happening with that firewall so that when we see something happening there, we understand what that means and we can take action on it. So we have to qualify that answer about SOC as a service. Now, we are maturing and going in that direction where eventually we will have more services around this and we will become more like what most folks think of as an outsourced SOC as a service. But I always like to qualify that answer because it's a question we get a lot. Also, if you look at this stack of services, you may say, well, where's email protection? Where is identity protection? So we are not all things to all people, but we are very focused in these areas. And I'm going to toot our horn here a little bit. We're generally very, very good in these focused areas. So our, as I mentioned, we are growing and we have a roadmap for expanding on some additional services, but we want to be really, really good at those services before we move into them. So that's kind of where we're going in the future with the security services. Is that, yeah, that's the last slide. So I don't know if you want to hop back up and close out, but you know, we have a Q&A portion of this, so happy to
Yes.
answer questions about any and all of that.
Brooks, how do you want to do that?
We'll call on people when you do answer, if you could do it from here so folks can hear you and see you on screen, that'd be great. But yeah, so if you have a question or an observation, if you'll raise your hand, I'll call on you and also introduce yourself and who you're with before your question or comment, just to give a flavor of who's in the room and who's asking. So who wants to start? It's thundering out there.
I know.
Nobody?
Oh, Brooke,
Yeah.
I'm always looking out from the mountains. I'm from Boone. I looked at your map. Your latest, didn't show a red line that I saw. Maybe I'm not looking right. Did I see a red line going through there, Tracy?
No, sir, you did not.
All
You
right.
are looking correctly. Yeah, the western part of the state, as you know, geographically is not an easy area to put in fiber if that's not where you already are working. So there are really reputable fiber folks out there that do that have all of the equipment and all of the things that are required to lay fiber in those areas. I have learned that there's also some funding that's going out that way to do that as well, but that's just not something that we have been investing in, but we certainly support all of the other fiber folks that do it.
Who else? John.
John Minchie with Slalom. On your 5-year plan, can you expand just a little bit on what's that going to entail? Is that like, I know it's the MCNC future state, but just a little bit of ideas of what you're thinking of what that would look like. I know you're going to a consulting part, but just a little bit about
Yeah.
what you think future state possibilities, wish list.
Yeah, obviously, we would be remiss if we did not look at AI for our customers and for ourselves. Quantum, we've been asked about from NC State by one of our board members, so of course we're not going to say no. But honestly, it's the right thing to do for what we're going to do. Data as a service has obviously come up as something that our customers are requesting. And looking at engagements, right, with folks around data as a service. There's a few other technologies, but I don't want to restrict it, right? Because part of the reason for doing a strategy engagement like this is we don't know what we don't know. And when we're hunkered down every day doing the work that we do, it's important that we lift our head up above the fray and listen to what other people have to say. What else is going on out there in the industry that MCNC could be doing and providing for our customers? And so the last time we did this, I think I had just started at MCNC, and we did a 5-year plan, but it was with the lens of COVID. Right. So expanding protected connectivity, maturing the cybersecurity practice, great place to work because we've grown our workforce very significantly. Preparing for the future, which really is expanding out. That's what this engagement is looking at the preparing for the future and then, blowing that out for this part of the strategy component, and then operational excellence. And so one of the lovely things about working at MCNC, we had a 100% customer engagement score. And that's incredible. I've never been anywhere that has had that. And our net promoter scores are through the roof, especially for a company like ours. So, but there's still a lot for us to do and learn in this space. So I don't want to be really restrictive in terms of what I think, which is the beauty of having somebody else come in and having feedback from other folks that are not in MCNC's organization. So hopefully that did not answer your question in the way that you want. Wow. From me, apparently. Yes, ma'am.
Jen from Palo.
Yes.
Question for you with regards to E-rate, right? I know the FCC is coming out with a new pilot program to expand cybersecurity. And they're offering, I think, 200 million in funding out there. Is that something you guys are talking with DPI on? Is that in the Friday Institute, I'm assuming? And
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. So we have a board that obviously I answer to, and then we also have the MCNC Advisory Council. And so at that meeting, so Ray Zeiss is in what we call the MAC. And I guess it was last week when we had our last MAC meeting, it was a very robust discussion about what we were going to do with that whole effort with DPI, because there's DPI is also on the MAC as well as have a place on our board. Yeah. We can't not let that go by.
It's like it's finally happening. So it's like I think it's 10 years overdue that they crossed Cat 2 and everything, but
Yeah.
fingers crossed.
Hey, we're closer than we were.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's that.
Dinesh from Hydro Technology.
Mhm.
Yeah, I understand from the map, it shows like more of a SWAN network, like state-wide area network. So on a state-wide network, how you classify it as an horizontal connectivity or a vertical connectivity? If it is going to, the connection is more of horizontal or vertical. So you sell dark fiber to the retail customer?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes.
So my question is that if you sell a dark fiber,
We
so
do.
retailer can get the connection from the MCNC, and we
Yes.
can lease it to the because in the map I could see it's more of an educational sector. If suppose my customer is an hospitality sector,
Mhm.
I want to come to MCNC to get the dark fiber. Is that possible to get? And
It is. And so thank you for mentioning that. There's a portion, there's a small portion of what you saw on that map that goes towards education and the telehealth network. That, the rest of that fiber, we sell.
Okay.
And so we do lease it to private entities, and you're welcome to do that.
Okay, so how many knock center you have across state?
Mhm. Yeah, one today. Yes. Yes, sir.
Doug, this week, following up on the E-rate funding question. What, given that most of your customers are state funded to an extent, you know, how do you look at the future of the mix of where all the money comes from to address all these important needs in cybersecurity?
I think that is really part of that future conversation, because one of the things for me as the president and CEO is seeing that there's a large portion that comes from connectivity, and that won't always be the case. So we'll have to look at other services that allow us to diversify that portfolio, especially as it relates to revenue, so that we can do more of what we're talking about with cybersecurity, and to ensure that MCNC is around for a really, really long time. So yes, we do get a lot of state funding, but my question is, in the future, will that always be the case? And we need to future-proof ourselves so that in the event that it isn't, that we are still around for a long time to serve our customers. Yeah, and that was one of the reasons why this whole strategy conversation has come up in preparing for the future. It's like, yeah, we've got to start thinking about 5 to 10 years from now, and it's not going to look like it does today.
Start here.
It's on from one, it is critical. I know Chris, you mentioned about your programs around the cloud technology adoption. Can you shed some light around what's your strategy around that?
That is part of the strategy conversation. It has to be. So we have been doing it kind of in an unstructured way, but part of the strategy is to have a real cloud plan and decide on, from here on out, for the sake of discussion, we're going to do cloud first for everything that we do from here on out. Is that going to be our approach? And are we suitably prepared to be able to do that? Do we have the right vendors in place to help support that? So it is interesting that, you know, John knows that at the state, that was like the biggest thing we were talking about. And so when I was there, we had a cloud strategy for what we needed to do. Now, granted, we had agencies that were just clamoring, you know, essentially, if you don't do it, we're going to do it kind of thing. And you get economies of scale when DIT does something like that, that's that broad from a shared services perspective. But when I came to MCNC, we didn't have a whole lot of customers that were clamoring for it. But when you look at it from a business perspective and how much it costs to run a data center and keep it maintained and operated, it's a real a discussion point. It's like, well, do we want to continue making that investment there when we could make it over here and make it more sustainable going forward? So that is a business. And then, of course, with that is a business model question.
And I'll add on that one thing that complicates.
Nice try.
One thing that complicates that conversation a bit for us is, in many cases, we are the cloud for our end customers. So as an example, we have a partnership with Zscaler.
Yeah.
You know, they are a cloud, you know, web content filtering and security company. We provide those services for primarily for K-12 customers here in the state of North Carolina, but we have hundreds of their nodes of proxy infrastructure positioned on our network so that we avoid having to send that internet traffic off of our network to a public cloud facility only to come back to us and then head out. So that's one example, but there are many others. In many cases, we are the cloud infrastructure provider. And so, you know, it's a complicated question in a lot of cases developing this strategy and figuring all that out is not always straightforward.
Take a last question right here.
Matt from Splunk.
You mentioned data as a service as a possible future area of interest. Can you talk a little bit about that and give us some idea of what you're thinking of? Because it's the future, there's no details yet to get there. Just curious as to what the thoughts.
So obviously, and I was just talking to BK about this, from an AI perspective, data is key. Knowing where it is, what it is, how you are managing it. So part of that is going to be consulting with our customers when they start to talk about what they want to do with AI. It's like, well, how are you going to manage your data? How are you going to have the proper data in order to even put into AI models? So that's one component of it. We've also had discussions with our customers about the data that they have within their organizations. How do they want to access that in the future? What do they want to do with it? And how we can help them structure that. And some of it may be an infrastructure that we have for them to use in order to utilize their data to make business decisions. And some of it may be the actual consulting and cleaning of the data, and it might be for multiple of our customers that want to be all in the same platform together. So when you think of higher ed and K through 12 and charter school and community colleges, well, they do share some data. And there has been a discussion at the legislature, especially about having one credential. So, you know, that you can get, that you own as a citizen. So if I want to give my credential to somebody because I'm getting ready to start a PhD program, I don't want to have to go to all of these entities to wait for them to give me a transcript. So imagine all of that data in one place and being available so a citizen can have its own, his or her own credential, right? To be able to do with it what they want. And the other entities put data on those credentials and lock that down. So that's just several opportunities that are there. You're welcome. Mm-hmm.
We need to transition to the last segment of our meeting. Thank you very much, Chris and Tracy, for being with us. Let's give them a round of applause for it. So Ed and Drew, I believe, are going to give us our briefing as well as the famous yellow page. So we'll pass those around. Please keep it moving as it makes its way to you.
Thank you, Tracy and Chris and Brooks. It's my understanding that their slides and our one pager will be available and emailed around to the group after the meeting. Drew, since I talked to you about this meeting, I thought about something to ask you in front of the group. Do you mind standing up with me? One other thing on MCNC, and Tracy and Chris, if you want to talk about this, is I understand it, unique may be too strong a word, but our backbone infrastructure that's been built up on 44 years puts us way ahead of many states. And as a result, we have this backbone platform that puts us ahead in line in getting a lot of the federal funding for broadband. Is that accurate? And Ruthie, you can answer that one too.
Really quickly, MCNC and Merit in Michigan, we are the only two research and education networks that have the assets that we do in a state. So many of the other states that got NTIA funding, it is to build what we already have. So if we are definitely a crown jewel for North Carolina and the other research and education networks. Look to us. I get questions constantly in our own group that we have. What are you all doing around cybersecurity? What are you doing around data center? Because they are still very small and trying to grow. So thank you for that reminder.
Good. Thank you. So in our brief time, Drew and I wanted to share a little information to update you on things that happen and might still happen in this year's General Assembly session. For those of you who've been here before, you know this is meant to be a resource document. If you have any questions after the meeting, we ask you to call us, and a number of you, Zach and Doug and others, are very familiar with this material. Before we get into the substance, If you don't know, our two DIT friends, Jonathan Shaw, General Counsel, CIO, and COO, and Dylan Frick, the Legislative Liaison. So any DIT questions, you can go to them, right, John?
That's right.
John used to help run DIT. So Drew, we have an even numbered year legislative session. Legislators came into town in April. They left the end of June. It's all over, right? And nothing might happen.
Not true. No, that's not true.
Question.
Yeah, that's a trick question. Whenever they adjourned at the end of June, they did leave themselves several opportunities to come back into session through the end of the year to deal with various items such as veto overrides, conference reports. So where they have come to an agreement on one version of a bill where they had different ideas on how to move forward. So there is an opportunity for them to come back in. I believe it's 4 times between now and the end of the year. They did note specifically that they could do a budget in November. Having said that, if they come to an agreement, they could do it any of these other times as a conference report. But the most likely scenario, if they're going to do it, it would probably be after the election. So that would be the November session.
And let me throw another trick question at you. So it's July 23rd. Do we not have a state budget?
We do have a state budget. Great question. We do have a state budget. Last year, they were a 2-year budget. They just didn't make any changes to it. For those of you who know, historically, in the even number years, election years, they come back in and revise the second year budget based on collections, revenue collections. The end of the fiscal year is June 30th. They were not able to come to an agreement on how much to spend between the chambers. And so there's a discrepancy there. And unwilling to spend more money, which is where the House position was. The Senate was a more fiscal conservative side, and they didn't come to an agreement, and so they adjourned again with the opportunity to come back several times.
Great. And so if you'll look at your document, and many of you may already know this, so each chamber passed a budget bill to adjust the 2-year budget. You see the numbers, and not to get too technical, you folks have been around a while, probably know this. So the budget, as you look at the General Assembly's website, is really 2 different things. It's the text bill that looks like any other bill you've seen. So if you go to the home page, you scroll down on the left-hand side, you look at, it says 2024 budget, the text, you could go to the House bill, page 228, and there are a lot of provisions there related to IT. You then see something called the committee report. We often call it the money report because it's about money. You click on that and you can see how to find that info. Drew and I did not put similar citations for the Senate budget bill because it was about 15% as long as the House bill, much shorter. They did not break it out the same way. So if you're looking for something in particular, you'd find it there. We'd be glad to answer questions. So Drew pointed out there's still the possibility legislators will consider other bills. One bill that I think the entire IT committee is watching, Senate Bill 743. It's been other numbers. It is extensive provisions that facilitate spending of more federal broadband money. You may have heard there's this federal BEAD program that's going to send, as I remember, over $1 billion more dollars to North Carolina for broadband. 743, the House passed it, the Senate hasn't taken it up. Drew and others, as I remember, it was also in the House budget. At least in my opinion, the legislators are going to be very incented before the end of the calendar year to pass some version of that so the state can successfully receive more federal broadband money. 2 other bills we flagged for you. You remember in the first quarter of last year, a lot of press, both at the state and federal level, about we don't want TikTok on government devices. And the Senate Secretary Edmiston, as you remember, rushed through a bill that passed unanimously in March. That bill has not moved since then. Not sure it will. And then on AI, there are a number of bills floating around that would authorize various committees and studies on that. Drew, I think it's fair to say, in our opinion, they don't have to pass this to consider AI issues, but that bill is still pending. Before we get to the last item, anything you'd add on number 2? Okay, and then finally, many of you were either physically with us or watched online the House IT Appropriations Committee on June 26, chaired by our friend Representative Jake Johnson. who in C-Tech last year gave Public Leader of the Year award. Secretary Weaver and Nate Denny and others gave an update from DIT on the things that are listed. If for some reason that address doesn't work when you paste it into your bar, you simply go to the General Assembly's website, look under committees and the horizontal list at the top, click on House IT, and it is there. Brooks, anything you would add on behalf of the association?
Jason.
Yes, many of you may know that a longtime significant legislative leader, Representative Jason Sain from Lincoln County, brought IT expertise to the House when he came 12, 14 years ago. Whenever it was, has announced he'll be leaving the legislature to pursue other opportunities. I think his retirement date is the 12th of August. If you see him, thank him. He has been such an amazing partner on appropriations and IT issues. He's told many of us he's not dying. He's just not going to serve in the legislature. So we'll look forward to working with him in other contexts. And he is also a past winner of the Public Leader of the Year award. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you both. Jason's been a great friend to us. His most recent role has been to be the senior chair of the House Appropriations Committee, so extremely important to the state budget. For the first time, NC Tech is actually a part of the state budget in an appropriation he helped make sure happened. So that was great that he was able to support us in that way before departing his role. But a tremendous supporter of the sector and great partner with the association. So thank you, Ed and Drew. As noted, all this will be sent around to you. Thank you, all of you, for being with us today. Thanks to Cisco and Presidio for sponsoring today. We will have one more of these quarterly sessions this year. It'll be on Tuesday, October the 23rd, same time and place, as well as virtual. That one will be sponsored by Spectrum Enterprise, so thank you to Spectrum Enterprise. Our featured guest speaker will be the state's new Chief Data Officer, Christy Burris, and that event is live on our calendar, open for registration. Obviously, we limit it to allow for accommodation in this room, but with unlimited online registration. So you want to be sure if you want to be there to register sooner than later. So with that, thank you very much for being here. Safe travels. Hope the thunder doesn't create too much problem for everybody. Thank you.